Alright, welcome back to iCanMod, and this is now part 3, video number 4, if we include the intro, of our Clean This series. So as you can see, we're going to talk about cleaning individual components today. Alright, so as you can see, these are the parts that majority of the parts that we pulled out of the case in the PC breakdown video. What we're going to do specifically today is we're going to take a look at cleaning motherboards. So I've got the motherboard here that we pulled out of the case. I'm going to show you how to remove the RAM, the CPU cooler, and also remove your CPU and clean that and get that ready to clean as well. I've also got another board in this box, which is an older board, which is a bit more dirtier. So we'll probably do the actual board clean on that board because it is dirtier, whereas this is pretty new and pretty clean already. So there's no point in doing it on that. But yeah, let's talk about what we're going to need today. All right, so some things that you're going to need. As you can see, I've got rid of the other parts that we don't need today. We've just got the motherboard here and the second one in the box. But in terms of things that you might need to clean, obviously you've got our trusty iFixit toolkit as per usual. Gloves. If your board is dirty, you're going to need gloves. Some shop towel for wiping larger surfaces. The precision Q-tips, which we use to clean the board. Some compressed air in a can, either that or an electric duster. If you have an electric duster, make sure it's got anti-static bristles. Potentially some thermal pads, which obviously if you've never done this before, you probably won't know what size you're going to need. So we'll see. We'll try and use, if there's any thermal pads on the board already, we'll try and reuse those. You'll need some isopropyl alcohol, and if you're putting your PC back together, which we will do a video on doing that, you will need some more thermal paste. So I've got quite a few things there. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to go through and set the camera up now, just to show you how to remove the rest of the components on the board, on this board specifically, the RAM and the CPU cooler. Okay, so as you can see, we've got the board here. To get the RAM out, nice and simple, you'll see here we've got a tab on each end. Now all you're going to do is pull the tab back, and then the RAM stick should just slot out. So that's one. So push down, and that should slot out just like that. Nice and easy. So that's your RAM out. Next thing we're going to take a look at is, and I'm just going to turn this around like this because it might be easier, is pulling off the CPU cooler. So we're going to have to pull the fan off, and be careful because these aluminium fins can be sharp if you don't have tough skin. And you'll notice that there's screws here, so 1, 2, 3, 4, and that will bring it off. So we're going to grab our trusty iFixit. Now you'll see here that the screws, they're supposed to be thumb screws, but if you tighten them correctly, they shouldn't come off easily. So we're going to use a screwdriver. Okay. And you only need to use a screwdriver just to get them started, because once they're started, because they are thumb screws on this one, they will be able to be turned quite easily with your fingers. Alright, if you've got any bigger hands than me, there is an extension kit in the iFixit tool case, so you can actually do it from a higher distance so you won't have the cooler in your way. Now, be careful, depending on how long it's been since you pasted the CPU with thermal paste, it could still be quite, runny. Just give it a nice easy wiggle off, and there you go. So you can see that there's still thermal paste on it. There's thermal paste on the CPU. Just put that down to one side so it's not got the paste down. Obviously you also don't want to try and scratch that surface, because that is what contacts with your CPU to take the heat away. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to get set up and we're going to go and give the CPU, the bottom of this a bit of a clean, and then we'll also clean the CPU as well. Obviously that's part of the motherboard video because there are components that we're pulling out of the motherboard. Alright, really quickly what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to remove the CPU from the board. This is an Intel CPU, so it has a little bit of a different mechanism compared to an AMD. The principle is essentially the same, so they all have a locking mechanism. So this one here, you're going to push and release it and then pull it back. That will then allow you to lift the shroud, and there's your CPU. This is where it gets a little bit messy and it pays to have some gloves. So let me put some gloves on really quickly and then we'll be good to go. Alright, so I've got my gloves on. We're going to pull the CPU out. Now you're going to just be very gentle when you pull this out, because on a Intel the pins are actually in the board, whereas on a Ryzen chip the pins are actually on the CPU themselves. So I've got all that out. That can go down just gently on there, and see how you can see just from that I've already got thermal paste on my gloves. Most good. And just to protect it now, there should be a cover for that, and I do have it. I'm going to grab it because we'll put the cover in to cover the pins while we're doing cleaning. So whenever you install or do a new build especially, if you've got a pre-built you might not have this, but there is a black cover that sits in that socket to protect the pins. I always save that cover when I build a computer, and if you build it if I built it for you, you'd get that cover. So if you ever pull the CPU out, you can put the cover in there to protect the pins. I'm going to locate that now, and then I'll be back and we'll go through and we'll clean the CPU, we'll clean the bottom of the CPU cooler and get them stored away, and then we can focus on cleaning one of the boards. Alright, so this cover here, it's a bit hard because it's black on black. So it has you can see some hooks on either end. The writing will go in line with the board. So on this MSI motherboard, it's going to go in line with the board, and it actually attaches to the top of the cover. So you're going to get you might not be able to see them, but there's two hooks at the top of the cover. So they're going to hook on the back of the socket, and then you're literally just going to clip it back in place, and then make sure that the tabs are underneath. Push the arm down and slide it under, and now your socket's nice covered, ready to go. So now we're ready to clean the CPU and the CPU cooler. So let me grab the cleaning supplies and we'll get that done. Alright, so we've got our CPU cooler. The CPU is also here just as well, it's just there on the ground. So I'm just going to grab some of your shop towel, which is one of the other things I mentioned you're probably going to need. I'm just going to get the excess off. So that gets most of it off, and I'm just going to do the same with the CPU. Alright, I'm just going to try and wipe the excess off the CPU as well. We will get most of this off because of the way that the CPU is shaped, or the heat spreader is shaped. So you can see it's just coming off. We'll finish that off with isopropyl alcohol. So just grabbing another piece of shop towel. I'm just going to do the top of the cooler. Just want to get that nice and clean. There you go, nice and clean. So that's ready to go back in the box. I'm going to do the same with the CPU. Just going to put it on a bit of cardboard because it's a bit better having it on wood. As you can see, the top of the CPU, top of the CPU is now clean, but we do have to clean in and around it. So this is where the Q-tips come into play. So I'm just going to get that set up, and then we'll clean the rest around the CPU and get that done. Alright, so with this one here, normally I'd fill the cap up, but I'm trying to be quick. So you just get a little cap full of the isopropyl alcohol, and then it's just a matter of using the precision tip to sort of rub along the edges, and you'll see that the Q-tip will just pick everything out of those edges and get it all nice and clean. One final little wipe there. There we go. That is the CPU completely ready to go. We'll put that back in its case and in the box, and then we can store it for another project. Alright, well, I'm a silly person. In my, obviously, boredom of lockdown, because I'm in Melbourne, I actually cleaned the other board, thinking that I wasn't going to shoot this series for a little while. So let me talk you through the process of what happens now, and then I will do some cleaning. We'll do some little montage shots of me actually cleaning it. What you're going to do is essentially everything needs to be cleaned. Now, the reason why we use these precision Q-tips rather than your shop towel is because you've got all your different, bits on the motherboard, your transistors, your resistors, solder points, different little chips and stuff, and you don't want to damage or knock them off. So by using a precision Q-tip, you can actually just get in there and gently clean around everything, and it won't, obviously you're not going to go in there and sort of stab at it, like this. But you can kind of go in around everything with a bit of isopropyl alcohol on there and just get everything nice and clean gently. So I'm actually going to do that with this board because in that motherboard box I have the anti-static bag, I have all the stuff that comes with it, because that's what I do. I keep all that sort of stuff. We're not going to pull any of the heat sinks off because we don't need to. But if your board was extremely dirty and you had, like the heat sinks here, you would need to pull them off. And underneath there is most likely going to be thermal pads. So you want to be really careful when you're pulling them off. If I do, actually, maybe we will, just to show you. I'll pull the heatsink off just to show you how to do it. It'll be in a bit of a montage sort of part that's coming up, and then we will finish cleaning the board. And yeah, that's it. So other than that, the first thing that I normally do is I just get some compressed air, holding it sort of, you can't see it because it's off camera, but the compressed air is here. I'm just going to just blow out any dust that might be there on the board. So that's gotten rid of all that. And now I'm going to go in with the isopropyl alcohol and clean everything. I'll even clean inside all the ports and everything like that. So we'll get that done now in a bit of a montage. And yeah, that'll be it for cleaning the motherboard. Now, like I said, I'm a bit crazy. I keep everything, so even the bag that the I/O shield goes into. And when you're storing motherboards, really, I always like to put them back into their anti-static bag. So it just slides back in the bag like so. And then we put it back in the box. But first, we will put the I/O shield underneath. So it's nice and tucked away. And the board goes back in like so. So that's that. Cool. So that's everything sort of packed away apart from the cooler, but I'll do that off camera. And that's how you're going to clean your motherboard. All right, just some final words with this one. If you are doing this for the first time, you saw me wearing gloves, please wear gloves. This stuff is 99.8% pure alcohol, isopropyl alcohol, and it needs to be 90% or higher if you're using it on electrical circuits like I did on that board. And also give them time to dry. It only takes a few minutes, but give it 5-10 minutes to dry before you start putting things back together and going to turn the computer on. The Q-tips, obviously, wonderful tool. Don't be too forceful with the Q-tips. You're just using them to sort of move the dust and get it out, because you can always go back over it with a can of compressed air to blow out the dust that you've loosened up as well. The shop towel, only use that on open, large surfaces like your heat sinks and things like that. Don't use it on your components because it will just leave lint and more dust will acquire there. Other than that, yeah, use gloves for those chemicals. If you're a young person, please have an adult there with you while you're using those chemicals. The last thing I want to do or see or hear is someone getting injured because they've ingested it or they've spilt it or got it in their eye or something. But that's pretty much it. Luckily, we didn't have to do thermal pads today. I actually want to do a specific video on thermal pads, which is another series that we're sort of cooking up at the moment called What Is It? Where we'll explain each individual component of a computer, and things like thermal paste and thermal pads is one of those videos that we're looking at doing. So other than that, if you are doing this for now, please try to keep those thermal pads intact. Just be careful when you're removing things where thermal pads could be, and you'll be fine. And don't forget to replace the cover on your CPU socket to make sure that is protected as well. If you have a Ryzen CPU where the pins are on the bottom of the CPU, make sure you put it back in a protective case while you are working on everything else. The little plastic case that you get in the box, that will do just fine for now. But other than that, that's it for this video. So thank you for joining me with this cleaning video. If you've got anything that you think I could do better or you'd like to see more of, please put them in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. It would really help because we are starting to grow. So we've just hit our 70 subscribers mark, which is awesome. And we want to continue that trend. But as we always say here around here at iCanMod, keep building and keep learning.